This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone. So on the message tonight, we gave the menu, and then there was a topic about shrutzim, and people wanted to know whether the menu had something to do with matering. The shrutzim, there's just a non sequitur, no connection between the two. But the Torah tells us at the end of this week's Parsha Shemini, Al teshaksu es nafsheisechem, do not defile your souls b'chal Sheretz Sheretz, with every crawling thing. V'lo yisitamu b'hem, do not defile yourselves with them, and it may sembam and become defiled. Ki ani Hashem lekeichem, because I am Hashem your God. V'eskadishtem, sanctify yourselves v'yisem kadoshim, and you will be sanctified. Ki kadosh ani, because I am holy. Do not defile your souls b'chal hasheretz haroimes al haaretz, with every creepy crawling thing. Remember many years ago my father spoke in South Africa, so he brought back the menu over there. What they eat over there in South Africa, they mamash eat shkotzim uramasim, crocodile ribs, and that's the best of it. But the Torah is saying, do not defile yourselves with any of these items. Why? Ki ani Hashem hamala escha me'eretz Mitzrayim, because I am Hashem who took you up from Mitzrayim, li'os lachem elikim. So the question is, ma shmita etzel har Sinai, what does one thing have to do with the other? Why in the context of not eating shrutzim does the Torah say, I am Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim? Everybody knows Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. It's something that it could say by any lav in the Torah, don't do it because I took you out of Mitzrayim. So the Gemara in Bava Metzia, on Daf Samach Aleph Amud Beis, asks, Yitzias Mitzrayim the Kosav Rachmana Gabe Shratzim Lamali. Why does the Torah mention the Exodus, leaving Mitzrayim, in the context of not eating shratzim? And the Gemara says even further, why does it use the language of Hamala Escha Me'eretz Mitzrayim? It should just say, don't eat it! Don't eat it! What's it got to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim? And why does it say Hamala Escha Me'eretz Mitzrayim? Yeah. Says the Gemara, L'chadatana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, Datana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ilmole Lo Halesi Es Yisrael Mi Mitzrayim Ela B'Shvil Davar Zeh Shein Metamin B'Shratzim Daye. Says Rivansh, if I took you out of Egypt just for one purpose, that you don't eat creepy crawling things, that would have been enough. This is enough of a reason to have taken you out of Mitzrayim that you don't eat shratzim. And the obvious question is, why are we picking on shratzim? Why are we saying that? Why is Rivansh saying it's enough that I took you out of Mitzrayim just not to eat shratzim? Why shratzim? Why not shatnez? Why not lashon hara? Why not any other lav in the Torah? I mean, there's 365 lavin, and the Torah could say it was kedai to take you out of Mitzrayim, not to violate lav A, B, or C. Why is the Torah picking on dafka shratzim? Right? You're bothered by that, Kuti, right? It troubles you, I know. So what exactly is the emphasis on Ki ani Hashem hamala eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim? Comes the Gemara in Eruvin on Daf Yud Gimel on Beis. Look at number 4. Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Meir had a certain Talmud. His name was Sumchus. Sumchus could explain to you 48 reasons why something which is tameh, and something which is tahar is tahar. The Gemara continues. Tana Talmud Vosik Hoya b'Yavneh. There was a righteous student in Yavneh, and remember the fact that this student lived in Yavneh. Shahoya mitaher es hasheretz b'meya v'chamishim ta'amim. He could explain to you why a sheretz was tahar, is tahar, 150 ways. I know there's a sefer, 100 reasons why Hanukkah is 8 days, right? He could write a sefer with 150 reasons why you could eat a sheretz, why a sheretz is tahar. I assume he did not have a hard time in the Rabbanos finding a job, but that's what the Gemara says. There was a student in Yavneh who could matir a sheretz with 150 reasons. What's the significance of that? What's the godless of that? How in the world could you be matir a sheretz? The Torah says a sheretz is tameh. Amar Ravina, says Ravina, let me give it a shot. I'm going to try to give you a reason why a sheretz should be tahar. Ani adayin v'atarenu. I will try the following kabbalah. Listen to this kabbalah. Uma nachash shememis, if a snake, which could kill, umar betuma, and increase tuma in the world, tahar, yet a snake is not tameh, a snake is tahar. not like a sheretz. A sheretz is tamei. The ches shratzim are tamei. A snake is not tamei. A snake is tar. So even though a snake could create added tumah in the world, but the snake is tamei. Sheretz, but a rodent. She'ein meimis. It can't kill. Umar betumah. It cannot increase tumah in the world. Right? Nobody ever got killed by a mouse. People scream. People shriek. They jump up on a chair. Nobody ever died from a mouse. Like koshikain. Certainly, the sheretz, which does not increase tumah in the world, should be tar. So Ravina tried the following kavachimer. If a nachash, which increases tumah in the world it could kill, is tar, then a sheretz, which cannot kill, certainly it should be tar. If a nachash is tar, certainly a sheretz should be tar. And the Gemara says it's not really a good kavachimer. Because snakes don't kill. Says the Gemara, Maisa koitz ba'alma. A snake is a thorn. Snakes don't kill. Snakes sit in their spot. If you step on them, they'll kill you. But they don't actively go out and kill. Now, we could give a shiur about snakes and whether they do kill or they don't kill. That's not the topic of tonight's shiur, whether snakes indeed kill or not. But this is the argument of Ravina, that if a snake which increases tumah is tahar, a sheretz which does not increase tumah, cannot kill, certainly should be tahar. So here you have this great Talmid Chacham in Yavne, and imagine, on his resume he writes, I got smicha, I wrote these svarim, and by the way, I could matir mice for you. Very impressive resume. What's exactly the great godless of this rabbi that he's able to matir a sheretz with 150 reasons? In fact, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, look at number 5, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, Ein moishivin b'Sanhedrin elami sheyodeya l'taher es hasheretz. If you want to be a member of the Sanhedrin, you need to have the following credential. You need to be able to explain why a sheretz is tahar min haTorah. Okay, so you want to be a big rabbi? Anyone out here want to be a big rabbi? So besides growing a very nice long beard, you also have to be able to matir shratzim. If you can't matir a sheretz, you're out. Don't even apply for Mayetzes Gedolei HaTorah if you don't think you can matir a sheretz. Says the Gemara, Rav also tried to use a kavachimer, the same kavachimer as Ravina and Eruvin Yud Gimel, and the Gemara said it's not really a kavachimer, snakes don't kill. Comes Tosfos, comes Rabbeinu Tam, which, by the way, for the Bnei Ashkenaz, the Rosh writes, Rabbeinu Tam was the greatest of all the Rishonim, greater than the Rambam even. Ashkenazim consider Rabbeinu Tam the greatest of all the Rishonim. Frekt Rabbeinu Tam, because Rabbeinu Tam, Demal lonu b'charifa shel hevel. What exactly is the point of being able to matir a sheretz? I mean, how you matir a sheretz? The Torah says a sheretz is tamei. So you're going to come up with all kinds of pilpulim and arguments and dialectic binyanim. You want to say a pilpul shir why a sheretz is mutter? For what? What's the benefit of that? It would be nonsensical. I mean, you could give an hour-long shir. You're going to say, according to the Birchas Shmuel's lamdus of this, a sheretz should be mutter. What's the point? That would be ridiculous. Shratz in the Torah says are tamei. I mean, that would be like somebody who could give an argument that a pig is kosher, but we know it's not. What exactly is the benefit? Why would a member of Sanhedrin need to know this skill of matering a sheretz? Why is that a critical aspect of being a great Talmid Chacham? So the Marsha, and the Marsha says as follows. We know that in order to be a member of the Sanhedrin, you need to be able to find somebody innocent, even if they're really guilty. That's one of the right? We know really Bezdin, even though they normally would technically administer capital punishment, but Bezdin very rarely actually meted it out. They always came up with justifications why maybe the person was not guilty. After all, if the glove don't fit,
you must acquit.
Thank you. A real member of the Sanhedrin, always was able to come up with a limud zechus to get somebody off the hook. Says the Marsha, when the Gemara says that a Talmid Chacham needs to be able to matir a sheretz, it doesn't mean he really needs to find a heter for a sheretz, that if somebody comes to ask a shaila, could you eat a mouse for supper? He stroke his beard and say, you know what, it's mam's shas adchak, I think you could eat it. It means, it's just an allegory, it's a way of saying that even where the case seems black and white, he could come up with like a loophole to get someone off the hook. That's how the Marsha understands it. And l'chayra, the Marsha's interpretation is based on the Yushalmi in Sanhedrin, where the Yushalmi says clearly in number 8, Kol she'eno yoidea lodon es hasheretz l'taroi u'letamoi. If anybody cannot figure out how a sheretz is tahar, ein yachol liftoyach b'schos. We'll never be able to acquit somebody who's being tried. In other words, the ability to matir a sheretz is like the barometer to determine whether somebody is creative and ingenious enough to get off the hook somebody who's really guilty. That's the first pshat in the proficiency of matiring shratzim. The Meir in Masechtas Sanhedrin interprets this a little bit differently. The Meir says like this. Bottom line is, in every generation, there are certain things that the tzibur is lax in, that the Chachmei Hadar need to make a fence and a safeguard and encourage certain type of behavior depending on the whatever area people are lax in. Now they're not going to just get up in shul and say, you know what, it's an Isser Doiraisa to take out a phone during davening. They're not going to just do that. Whether they like pull a needle out of a haystack. What they'll do is they'll find some basis somewhere in halacha where in fact that's what the halacha is demanding of the time. Where do they get it from? They got to use some creativity. They have to be somewhat open to be able to interpret beyond the letter of the law. They sometimes need to take extra legal practice, supersede whatever it says black and white. There's a certain ability and a certain requirement that the members of Sanhedrin have in order to sort of tailor-make the halacha for whatever the generation needs. What's the barometer to determine whether this individual has what it takes to create new safeguards and new takanos and new enactments for the time? The guideline is as follows. If he could come up with a heter for a sheretz, that's sort of the barometer to determine if, in fact, this person is qualified to innovate new takanos that are not mentioned in the Gemara or mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, the ability to matir a sheretz is also an allegory. It's a mashal. Can this person extrapolate and sort of find a very nebulous basis in the Torah for what's required of the times? In fact, the Kli Yakar says, even though a Navi cannot contravene the halacha, right? If a Navi comes and says, you don't have to wear tefillin anymore, you don't have to keep Shabbos anymore, you kill the Navi. Doesn't matter how much he knows. But as a Hirasha, as a one-time thing, a Navi has the authority to even contravene the halacha. Like Eliyahu on Har HaKarmel, where Eliyahu said, if once and for all, let's determine who's the real God. Is it the God of the Jews? Is it the God of the Baal? So Eliyahu had everybody bring karbanos, right? With karbanos, you can't bring karbanos outside of the mikdash. So as a special Hirasha, Eliyahu Navi paskin that we could do it. What gave him the right to do that? A Navi is allowed to go against the halacha as a Hirasha. What's the barometer to determine whether this individual is on that level? Could he find a heter for a sheretz? In other words, it's not that someone on the Sanhedrin really has to write a tshuva, shalos a tshuva, and it come out, v'lachein muter lecho shratzim bizman hazeh. That's not what we're looking for. It's a barometer to determine whether this person has what it takes to be able to administer a hirasha. Comes the Maral. Maral gives another interpretation. And let me explain it to you the way I understand it, and then I'll tell you how others understand it. Obviously, I think I'm right. But you'll decide for yourself. The Maral says like this. What exactly is the benefit of being able to matir a sheretz? Sheretz is asur. Of what consequence, of what benefit is it to anybody to be able to matir a sheretz? I'll give you the mashal of the Maral, and then I'll give you my own mashal. Maral says like this. Most things in life are not black and white. In most issues in life, it's not like he's right and he's wrong, or this is the way it is, right? You could debate any issue, and almost any issue is not black and white. Every issue has stadim, lakan or lakan. You can make the case this way, you can make the case that way. You say why this is a good idea, you could say why it's a bad idea. In fact, most things in life, I could give you 50 reasons why it's a good idea and 50 reasons why it's a bad idea. And at the end of the day, you need to make a definitive decision. Now, once you make a definitive decision, it doesn't mean that's the only way to look at it. It just means that's the best way to look at it under the circumstances. So, for example, the Maral says, you have two people arguing about a piece of wood. Now, in the ancient times, they believed, and possibly it is still a Torah hashkafa, that all matter is made up of one of four elements. Eish, fire, ruach, wind, mayim, water, and afar, earth. So they have a piece of wood and they're arguing, what is the basic element of wood? Is wood air or is wood earth? We don't argue about these things nowadays. We have more ridiculous things to argue about. But in those days they would argue, what is wood? Is wood air or is wood earth? Says the Maral, well, you can make the case it's air because after all wood floats on water, and if it was earth it would sink. On the other hand, if it was air, wood would never burn. So you could make an argument one way, you can make an argument another way. Now, a true chacham is able to see that there are dimensions of wood that are air and dimensions of wood that are earth. They're both true. And you need to know both elements of wood. Here's my mashal, okay? Let's say there was a presidential race coming up. And you have two bad candidates. Just theoretically. And you have 1,000 reasons why not to vote for one guy, and you have 1,001 reasons not to vote for the other guy. The other lady, you have 2,000 reasons not to vote. But just theoretically, if you have two candidates, is it either him and he's perfect and there are no flaws? Of course not. Everybody has their issues. So now we have to throw the 1,000 deficiencies on one side of the scale, 1,000 deficiencies on the other side. Ultimately, you're going to have to vote for somebody. But it doesn't mean you don't recognize all the various arguments one way and all the various arguments the other way. Says the Maral, so too a Talmud Chacham. You're right, a Sheretz is usher. But you have to know all the dimensions of the Sheretz. Maybe there are aspects of the Sheretz that you can make the argument that it's kosher. Now, bottom line is you're not going to eat it. It's tamei because the Torah says tamei. But does that mean that every dimension and every facet of the Sheretz is tamei? Maybe there are aspects and dimensions and levels that there's what to say for a mouse. You're not going to eat it. You're not going to vote for the mouse. You're not going to put it in your system. But maybe there are levels of it that are tahar. That's how I understand it. The Sefer Shvilei Pinchas understands it on a Kabbalistic level, and I'll tell you what he says. It says like this. The Gemara says in Masechta Pesachim, look at number 12, on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis, Tanya, Rabbi Meir, Am ha'aretz asur lecha basar. A unlearned Jew cannot eat meat. That's why do we serve meat here at the Shiur? Because if you come to Shiur, that means you're already very learned. Right? That's why we make sure we serve meat, and all the Amirats, they stay out. Not to say that everybody doesn't come, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but anyone who's here, they're already graduated, right? And Amirats cannot eat meat. Shenemar, Zois Tairas HaBehema, Kol ha'oisek b'Torah mutar lecha. Anyone who learns Torah is allowed to eat meat. Right? People ask me, what's your opinion on pita? I agree, based on this Gemara, that they should not be eating meat. Exactly. Kol she'eino oisek b'Torah asur lecha basar. I fully support that. But a Jew, there's a big mitzvah to eat meat. What's the mitzvah? Why is it a mitzvah to eat meat? So Arizal explains like this. That there are 4 categories of existence. There's doimim, inanimate, tzomeach, that which grows, chai, alive, medaber, that which speaks. And any time a higher level of existence consumes a lower level of existence, it's elevating the lower level of existence. So, for example, if a cow eats grass, the cow is doing a favor to the grass. The grass used to be only grass, and now it's a cow. And when you eat a cow, you're doing the cow a big favor. Because it used to be a cow, and now it's you. It used to say moo, and now the cow is saying me'emosai koyer neshama ba'arvin. The cow used to be saying nothing, and now it's learning Shas. Now it's coming to a Shiur. So whenever you eat an animal, you're doing that. In fact, the cow, people want to know, what is the cow saying? Cow's saying, put me in your cholent. The cow is chalishing to land in your system. It wants an aliyah. But in Amoretz, the Amoretz is not on a higher level than the behema, so it's not doing the behema a favor, so Taka, he can't eat the food, he can't eat the meat. Someone who doesn't learn Torah cannot eat meat. Because how does he have a right to kill the animal? The only right that we have to kill an animal is because we're doing the animal a favor. We're elevating the animal. But if so, in Amoretz never graduated from that level. Can't eat the meat, says the Gemara. In fact, the Gemara says in Chula, and look at number 14, Rav Nachman had a very learned wife named Yalsa, and Yalsa said to Rav Nachman the following, that everything in this world that God prohibited, there's a corresponding way that it's mutter. In other words, there's nothing in this world that's always usher. For example, the Gemara says, blood? You think you can never eat blood? You can eat blood. Well, what's chopped liver? Chopped liver is blood. Liver is blood. So blood is usher, but liver is mutter. The Gemara says, nida? Nida is mutter. When it's dam nida, it's usher. But some types of blood is mutter. People think, yeah, I'm not going to show the rabbi. It's probably usher. No, it's usually mutter. It's usually mutter. The Gemara continues. Chel of behema. Yeah, you can't eat the fat of a behema. Chel of chaya. Chel of chaya. You can eat the fat of a chaya. Chazer. Pig. Pig is sometimes mutter. Even without Dunkin' Donuts. Right? How? You have, the Gemara says, the brain of the shibuta fish tastes exactly like a chazer. Mamish, I'm telling you. Exactly. There's no difference at all. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev wants to know what exactly is the point over here. What's the Gemara saying? And what's the concept? What's the principle that everything that's also has a permitted counterpart? Of what benefit is that to us? Says Rabbi Yitzchak, every food in this world has sparks of kedusha that are elevated when they're consumed. But the problem is, that's when the food is kosher. What about if the food is treif? You can't consume the food. So when you don't eat the food, that's how it elevates the sparks of kedusha. But that's only if you don't eat the food because Hashem said so. But what if you don't eat the food because, say, pig? It's disgusting. Blood? It's disgusting. So therefore, the wife of Rav Nachman teaches us not disgusting, it's delicious. Taste the brain of the shibuta, you'll see how delicious pig is. And now, when you don't eat pig, when you pass by the delicatessen, they say, we serve boar's head, you don't say, oh, that's disgusting, meal mart is much better. No, you say, it's even better than meal mart. But what can I do? I can't eat it. I can eat shibuta, but I can't eat that. This way, the Rebbeinu Shalom allows us to experience everything, and when we refrain from the forbidden, we do it with the kavanah, that we're doing it because Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want us to do it, and that is what extracts the holy sparks in everything in this world. Well, says the Shvilei Pinchas, and this is how he understands the Maral, differently than we explained it. That is why it's important for a Talmud Chacham to understand how there are aspects of a Sheretz which are tahar. This way you realize there's Kedusha and Tara in the Sheretz, and when you don't eat it, this is what allows you to elevate the nitzotzos of Kedusha. Again, the way we explained it was just for the intellectual, full understanding of everything, it's important to know that all the dimensions of a certain item. Okay. So far we explained 3 reasons for the proficiency of being Matir or Sheretz. Number 1, it's just a way of saying that this Chacham could acquit somebody even if he's guilty. Number 2, it's a way of saying that this Chacham has the ingenuity and creativity to come up with a Hayrashah and go against the black and white halacha if the times need it. And the Maral says the proficiency of being able to Matir Sheretz is in order to understand the dimensions, the full dimensions of everything in this world. Comes the holiest Ephraim. You know who wrote the holiest Ephraim? The Kli Yakar. And the holiest Ephraim says like this. He says a very important lesson in this Gemara, that this Talmud was able to Matir a Sheretz in 150 ways. Why? He says like this. Because you have to know that if you see somebody doing something wrong, nobody just does something wrong. Most people, when they do something wrong, they justify it. and they come up with heterim, and they come up with rationalizations, and they explain to themselves that it's avada, it's asur, but for me it's mutter. People fool themselves. You know how we know if people fool themselves? Says the Gemara, look how easy it is to fool yourself. There's an Amoira that could come up with 150 heterim for a Sheretz. And a Sheretz is, there's nothing more black and white in the Torah than a Sheretz is asur. And yet this Amoira could come up with 150 rationalizations that it's mutter. You know what you see from here? You see from here that a person could convince themselves of anything and substantiate it with every raya in the world. So the next time a person says, should I do it or should I not? I won't ask anyone. It's mutter, it's mutter. Watch out. Because in this world, it is so easy to deceive yourself. Lahavdil, George Bernard Shaw said, when it comes to self-deception, every man is a genius. When it comes to tricking yourself and fooling yourself, all of a sudden we become go'inei olam. The proof is that an Amoira is able to take the most explicit lav in the Torah and matir it in 150 ways. Bottom line, you can't do it because the Torah says you can't do it. But look what man could have come up with if left to his own devices. He could create 150 heterim for a Sheretz. By the way, in the Sefer and Todos Yaakov Yosef, one of the Talmidim of Baal Shem Tov, he also says this idea, he quotes a Kli Yakar, that the idea, the lesson of being able to matir a Sheretz is a lesson to every individual. The frailty of the human mind. In other words, people who just go through life, I'll make my own decisions, I don't need to ask, I don't need to confer, I don't need to be shayel eitzah, I don't need to ask halacha. I know the derech hayashar. Yeah, you know the derech hayashar? Kol derech ish yashar be'ena. Everybody thinks they're on the derech hayashar. Not only that, you could have the biggest Rasha in the world, and he'll explain to you 150 reasons why everything he does is a mitzvah. There's nobody in this world that says, I'm really a bad guy, but what could I do? No. People think everything they do is justified with... I'll bring you a raya from the Chumash, and from the Mishnah, and from the Gemara, and from Tosfos, and from the Marsha. Says the Gemara, we could do that to Matir Sheretz also. Reb Tzadok HaKohen also, in one of his lesser-known Svarim, Or Zaru Al Tzadik, he also advances this explanation in the Gemara, that the importance of understanding, not to allow a person just to guide themselves in life, because that's the recipe for disaster. So the Shvilei Pinchas comes with a beautiful remez to this. It says in Pirkei Avos, Al Tistakel B'kankan Ela B'ma sheyesh bo. Don't look at the cask, don't look at the barrel, look what's inside. Right? Don't judge a book by its cover. Well, the word kankan, kan is 150. Kan is 150. Al Tistakel B'kankan. Don't leave matters up to your own judgment. 150 reasons this way, 150 reasons that way. Don't think that way. Ela b'ma. Ma, the word ma is a remez to anivos. It's a remez to humility. Like Aaron and Moshe and Aaron said, "V'nachnu ma." What are we? What are we? That was their expression of humility. In other words, al tistakel b'kankan. Person cannot allow themselves just to, I'll decide. I have very good svaras, I have good arguments, I have good rationales, I have good reasons. I'm a clear thinker. I'm a level-headed guy. I can make my own decision. Al tistakel b'kankan. You can make your own decisions. You'll come up with 150 reasons this way, 150 reasons that way. Sometimes ela b'ma, you need to bow your head. What does the halacha say? Okay, Rabbi Isai, fasten your seatbelts. Now we're gonna move on to the next level. What exactly is the significance of these 150 reasons? Why 150? What is the importance, what is the meaning of the number 150? We've spoken many times about various numbers, 91, 95, 101. What in the world is 150? Rabbi Isai, we've also lately been speaking about the Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. The Gemara tells us, look at number 22, Nun Sharei Bina Nivru Ba'olam. There are 50 gates of wisdom in this world. And V'kula nitnu LaMoshe, they were all given to Moshe Rabbeinu, chasar echad, except for one. Shenemar, v'atechasreyu ma'at me'elekim, the Rebbeinu Shalom diminished him just a little bit less than God himself. So simply, this Gemara is saying there are 50 gates of wisdom, and Moshe Rabbeinu only had 49. So we're going to feature a sefer that we never featured before. There is a commentary on Masechta Idyos called Shushan Eidos from Hagoin Reb Wolf Baskovitz, who says an unbelievable thing. This idea that there are 50 levels of wisdom, and Moshe was missing one. Is it possible for a human being to know some of the 50th level? He says absolutely. It's absolutely possible. And you have to say even Moshe knew a lot of the 50th level. You know why? Because if the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu was missing one, he was a little bit less than God, everybody knows that in spirituality, the higher you go, the bigger the level is. Which means, says Reb Wolf Vaskovitz, the 50th shar is bigger than all 49 together. In other words, not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the 50th is much more expansive than all the previous 49. And if Moshe Rabbeinu was missing the 50th, then how could you say he was only a little bit less than God? He was nowhere near the Rebbeinu Shalom. Says Reb Wolf Vaskovitz, Moshe Rabbeinu had a good chunk of the 50th. That's even implied in the Gemara. It says, Kula nitnu LaMoshe. They were all given to Moshe. Meaning even the 50th was given to Moshe. It was just that a little bit was taken away. In fact, the Arizal says very clearly that at Kabbalas HaTorah, Moshe Rabbeinu was given all 50. Like the Pasuk says, Vayidaber Hashem es kol. Kol is b'gematria 50. By the Chet HaEgel, he had to go down from 50. That's what it says, Lech Raid, go down from Lech, go down from 50. And Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of 49, but at the end of his life, Vayal Moshe Me'arvois Moyav. Moyav is Gematria 49, Elhar Nevoy, Nun Boy. He got all 50. So that also substantiates this idea that a human being could get the 50th. In fact, Chassam Sofer writes that Yoshua ben Nun, why bin Nun? Why not ben Nun? Bin Nun. He was Maven, the 50th shar that is Rabbi Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says it is possible to get the 50th. Says Rav Wolf Baskovitz, how many dimensions of Torah are there? 4. Pardes, Pshad, Remez, Drush, Side. And a Talmud Chacham needs to know all 4. The Arizal says in this world, we came down to know all 4. Pshat, Remez, Drush, Side. And you got to do whatever it takes to try to master them as much as possible. The Arizal says in number 23 in the Shara Gugulim, you don't know it, you can't learn it, get a Rebbe, get somebody, you got to. That's what we're here for. We're here to increase our knowledge of Pardes. Says Reb Wolf Baskovitz, if there are 50 levels of wisdom, then that means every dimension of Torah has 50 levels. So that means Soid has 50 levels, and Drush has 50 levels, and Remez has 50 levels, and you would think Pshat has 50 levels as well, total of 200 levels. Says Reb Wolf Baskovitz, that's good for Soid, that's good for Drush, that's good for Remez, but there's no way Pshat has 50 levels. You know how many levels Pshat has? 1! Other ya, other nisht. What levels? Pshat. Either yeah or no. Pshat is Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lema. Don't eat the Sheretz. There are no drays, there are no finaglings, there are no kvetches, there are no chaps. Pshat? Pshat is Pshat. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lema. Daber el b'nei Yisov v'yikluli truma. There are no levels. Remez, you could find all kinds of remazim. You could have drays, chaps. It really means the opposite of what you would have thought. You could have drashas. You could have secrets and Kabbalah. That's all good. The 50 levels are in the 3 halakim of Torah. In Pshat, there are no levels. They're just yes or no, black and white. Says Rav Wolf Baskovitz, when the Gemara says that the student could be Matir, the Sheretz, in 150 ways, you know what it means? What it means is, on the dimension of Remez, he could come up with 50 Remazim that the Sheretz is mutter. And the dimension of Drush, he could come up with 50 Drushes while the Sheretz is mutter. And the level of Kabbalah, he could come up with 50 esoteric secrets from the holy masters why the Sheretz is mutter. But in Pshat, there's nothing to talk about. The Torah says, don't defile your soul. In Pshat, it's no. So the Talmud Chacham could come with 150 reasons to matter the Sheretz. But it doesn't mean the Sheretz is mutter. Because in the world of Pshat, it's no, N-O, loy mitin aleph. That's the significance of how he was able to matter the Sheretz 150 ways. Bottom line is, it's still Asur. By the way, says Rav Baskovitz, that's why this Talmud lived in Yavne. Yavne is Oisio, Bina, the 50 levels of Bina. That's a big side. In other words, what's important to know is that when a person learns Torah, with all the Shiurim and all the Pulpulim and all the Drashas and all the Ramazim and Gematrios, don't ever forget there's something called Pshat. Pshat is, put on the tefillin, keep the Shabbos, daven like a mensch, and that's all you need to know, bottom line. The Baal Shem Tov writes in Parshas Shemais that after all of his hasagos of sailing up to the heavens, bottom line is, he never loses focus. That pshat, the simple interpretation. Simple interpretation. Okay. Let us conclude with the following segment. So here, the Nachash comes to Adam HaRishon. And he says, Adam, eat the fruit. It really looks good. Eat the fruit. Hashem said, the day we eat it, you're going to die. You think the Nachash tried to persuade Adam in the realm of Pshat to eat the fruit? Of course not. Pshat, the Nachash came with the Sharnun. We already spoke this out from Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz by one Shal Shudas. The Sharnun of Remez, Sharnun of Drush, Sharnun of Soid. He came up with drays and finagling and kvetches and knetches and chaps. Why it's mutter? But the Nachash ignored the pshat. The pshat is, he can't eat it. So he utilized 50. 50 of Remez, 50 of Drush, 50 of Soid. By the way, the Megala Amukais writes that why is he called Nachash? The Nun represents the 50th level of Tumah that is in him. Nachash stands for Nun, Sharei Chachma. Satan, Sharei Tumah Nun. And the Satan is persuading Adam to eat from the Yetz Hadas. The reason why Ravina says that he would matter Sheretz in 150 ways, does anybody remember where did Ravina make the Kal V'chomer from? From the Nachash. What's he bringing the Nachash for? He's being merames to this idea that where does this ability to take something which is obviously wrong and create innovative ways to rationalize it, where does it come from? What's the source? It comes from the snake. And that's how the snake works. Kal v'chomer. He says, first do this, and then do a little bit worse, and then a little bit worse, and then that's the operation of the Nachash. Well, says the Megala Amukais, in Mitzrayim, and we're going to see Mitzrayim, was Paroi is considered the Nachash. Paroi, the Mekubalim write, and the Shlach HaKadosh writes, Paroi is the embodiment of the Nachash. Paroi in Tanakh is called the Tanim. Then what does the Nachash eat? Afar, ha'afar. Paroi is oisios ha'afar. That is why the Nachash is the Hanachash ha'ya'arum. He was clever. In Mitzrayim also, we were Eiroim ve'eria. Mitzrayim we fell to what? The 49th level of Tumah. Had we remained there a moment longer, we would have fallen to the 50th level, the point of no return. So how are we going to get out of that? How many days between Pesach and Shavuos? B'hoitziacha es ha'ami Mitzrayim ta'avdun. Says Megal Mukos, there's a big nun in the word ta'avdun. Ta'avoid nun. You have to work 50 days to get you out of the 49. You have to work. David HaMelech. Rabbi said David HaMelech was the Gilgal of Adam HaRishon. He had to rectify Adam HaRishon being influenced by the 49. Who does he marry? The king of 7, Bas Sheva. Bas Sheva. Bas Sheva. That's what Megal Mukos says. So here's the Mamash Oyam B'Naira. We know that Adam HaRishon gave 70 years of his life away to David HaMelech. Why David HaMelech? Why David? I'll take 70 extra, you know. Let's auction it off. Let's sell it. I don't know. eBay. Why Adam HaRishon? Why did he give it to David? Well, the Arizal writes, David HaMelech was the Gilgal of Adam. In fact, you know, Hashem tells Adam, Ki biyoyim acholcha mimenu mois tamas, on the day you eat it, you're going to die. What do you mean the day you're going to eat, you're going to die? He didn't die on the day he ate it. But David, who is his Gilgal, was supposed to die on the day he ate it. And it's only because Adam gave him 70 years that he didn't die. That's why Adam Rishon brought Misa La'olam. David corrects that. How's that? David Melch Yisrael, Chai V'Kayam. That's why David doesn't go to sleep, because sleep is 1/60th of Misa. So comes David to the world. And how many prakim of Tehillim does David HaMelech compose? Kuf Nun, 150 prakim. Why? Because Adam was influenced by the snake, 50 in Remez, 50 in Drush, 50 inside. He injected him with 150. So comes David HaMelech, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen, and he composes 150 prakim of Tehillim to Mesakim, the Chet of the Nachash, Mesakim, the Chet of the Yetzaras. There's a Medrash, number 31, a Medrash in Shemais Rabbah. Simply, it's impossible to understand. The Chartumei Mitzrayim give Paroi the following Eitzah. Paroi, we want you to shech, look at number 31, Miktane Yisrael, Meya v'chamishim ba'era v'meya v'chamishim ba'era, 150 kids a morning, 150 kids an evening. 150 kids a morning. What's this got to do with anything? Where'd they come up with that number from? The answer is because the entire purpose of being in Mitzrayim was to purify ourselves. This is the Arizal, the first Arizal in the beginning of Shab Sukkim, and he writes this in many places, that Yetzias Mitzrayim was to purify Klal Yisrael from the Zuama, from the Tumah, of Adam Harishon, of the Nachash. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, what's his first miracle? He takes the stick, Yehilasanim, it turns into the snake. In other words, he's indicating that's what we're here for. That's our problem. That's what we need to correct. It's because of the original snake. So the whole reason we went down to Mitzrayim is the Chet of the Nachash. What was the Nachash's tactic? The Nachash's tactic was the tactic of that student in Yavne. The Nachash says, forget the Pshat, I know it's Asr. I'm going to come up with 150 drashos and ramazim and soidas, why it's Matir. The trick of the Nachash was to Matir the Sheretz. That was his whole tactic. He came up with every drei chap finagling way to get out of the blatant isser of you can't eat from the Yetz Hadas. So therefore we go down to Mitzrayim, and Parai is the Nachash. So he's trying to reawaken the sin of the Nachash. He's shechting every morning 150 kids. David HaMelech is trying to correct the sin of Adam Rishon. He's mechaber 150 prakim of Tehillim. By the way, says the Arizal, a mikvah, take the numerical value of mikvah, mem kuf 140, vav hey 11, 151. What's 151? Because tumah is 150. But to get out, to extricate, to rise above, you need the one. You know what the one is? Pshat. You can't do it. With all the rationalizations and all the justifications, what about the bottom line? Al tishak, so it's saying you can't eat the bug. So therefore, suggests in the Sefer L'Kutei Ma'amarim as follows. Says Ribbon Shalom, the whole reason you went down to Mitzrayim is you're trying to rid yourself of the poison of the snake. The poison of the snake is all those 150 rationalizations and justifications to take something which is blatantly usher and to finagle a heter. Well, says Ribbon Shalom, if I took you out of Mitzrayim just for one reason, that you don't eat the Sheretz, meaning that you recognize that when I tell you no, it's no, and when it's yes, that alone is Kedai. We ask, that alone is Kedai. All the lavin are important. No, that's the whole reason we went down to Mitzrayim in the first place. The whole reason why we went down is to rid ourselves of that type of impurity of, but like this and like that, and you could always, there are different ways, there are always different opinions, right? You ever hear that? There are always different ways of looking at it. There are always, but isn't there a Das Yochid? Isn't there this opinion, this rabbi, that rabbi? What about the Shulchan Aruch that says no? What about that one? That's why we went down to Mitzrayim in the first place, says Rebbe Shem. If I took you out of Mitzrayim just to be able to teach you can't eat the Sheretz, Dayenu. So add it to the list. You have 15 Dayenus, we have a new one. So Rebbe Shem took us out of Mitzrayim just to learn this lesson. There are 150, don't forget about the one. The one is Pasha Pshat Rabbi Yehuda. Have a great evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.